Tonight, we don't look for the roar of the crowd or the clash of steel. Instead, we find ourselves in the quiet, dim corridors of a palace at midnight. The torches are burning low, flickering against cold marble. The air is heavy with the scent of old parchment and cooling wax. Take a deep breath. Feel the weight of the day leave your body, just as the weight of an empire once sat on the shoulders of the men we speak of tonight. History is usually told in loud voices, but tonight we whisper it. We look at the men who didn't just rule Rome, but were consumed by it. Men who reached for the sun and found only the cold, hard reality of the throne. As we drift back nearly 2,000 years, imagine the city of Rome asleep around you. The Tiber River flowing silently under stone bridges, the shadows long in the empty forum. Let your mind wander through the lives of those who held everything, only to realize that power is as fleeting as a dream. And as you settle into your covers, if these stories of ancient ghosts help you find your own peace, consider leaving a like and subscribing to our journey. I'd love to hear in the comments where in the world you are drifting off from tonight. But for now, close your eyes. The world is quiet, and Rome is waiting. Rome barely pauses. Galba's reign ends not with outrage, but with a shrug. The moral emperor is gone. The auction continues. And next, Rome gets Otho, a man who reigns even less time, but with significantly more drama. Marcus Salvius Otho is not a military genius. He's not a moral reformer. He's not even especially intimidating. What he is charming, stylish, socially fluent. The kind of man who remembers names, throws good parties, and somehow survives other people's disasters. He's born in 32 CE into a wealthy but not particularly prestigious family. His father was strict, traditional, and obsessed with discipline. Otho reacts to this in the most Roman way possible, by becoming fashionable, indulgent, and deeply concerned with appearances. Young Otho spends a lot of time in elite circles. He dresses well. He grooms carefully. He understands social leverage before most people understand themselves. He becomes close friends with a certain young man named Nero. Yes, that Nero. Early on, Otho and Nero bond over shared interests, luxury, spectacle, and doing whatever they feel like because rules are more of a suggestion anyway. For a time, Otho is one of Nero's inner circle companions, a trusted confidant during the years before power corrodes everything. And then comes Poppaea Sabina. Poppaea is intelligent, ambitious, and extremely aware of her own influence. Otho marries her first, Nero notices her second, Nero decides he wants her third. And in Rome, that's usually the final step. Nero sends Otho away, officially appointing him governor of Lusitania, modern Portugal. It's framed as an honor. Everyone understands it's exile with better scenery. Otho leaves Rome, his wife, and his future behind, and spends the next decade governing quietly at the edge of the empire. Here's where Otho surprises people. He's competent. He governs fairly. He avoids excess cruelty. He builds relationships with local elites. He stays out of scandal. For a man who once lived for attention, Otho learns patience. And more importantly, he learns how power actually moves, through loyalty, not spectacle. So when Nero collapses in 68 CE, Otho sees an opening. He supports Galba, the stern old general marching toward Rome. Otho bankrolls the effort, spreads influence, and fully expects to be rewarded with adoption and succession. After all, this is Rome. Loyalty is transactional. Galba, however, chooses morality over pragmatism, or maybe just stubbornness. He adopts Piso instead. Otho is furious, but he doesn't rage, he calculates. He quietly contacts the Praetorian Guard, the same men Galba insulted, underpaid, and lectured. Otho promises what Galba refused: money, respect, and appreciation. The Guard listens. They always do. On January 15, 69 CE, Galba is killed in the Forum. Piso follows shortly after. Their reigns end before most Romans finish breakfast. That same day, Otho is declared emperor. Rome blinks. Otho moves fast. He knows exactly how unstable his position is. He addresses the Senate respectfully. He restores honors stripped by Galba. He promises stability. He publicly praises Galba because Rome prefers its coups politely framed. Most importantly, Otho tries to be everything at once. To the Senate, he is dignified and restrained. To the people, he promises generosity. To former Nero's supporters, he adopts some of Nero's symbols. To the army, he promises loyalty and reward. This is ambitious, admirable even. Also, impossible. Because while Rome is sorting itself out internally, something much bigger is happening far away. On the Rhine frontier, the legions have already declared their own emperor. His name is Vitellius. And unlike Otho, Vitellius has the full support of hardened frontier armies who don't care about Senate approval, Roman etiquette, or indoor politics. They care about marching, winning, and being paid. Otho knows this. He has a choice. He can delay, negotiate, and risk losing momentum. Or he can act. He chooses to act. Otho marches north with what forces he can assemble. His generals urge caution. His advisors suggest waiting for reinforcements. Otho, perhaps remembering how quickly fortunes change in Rome, decides speed matters more than perfection. This is where the tragedy deepens. Otho is not a bad leader. He listens, he plans, but his troops are inexperienced compared to Vitellius's Rhine legions, and Roman civil wars are rarely forgiving. The two sides clash near Bedricum in northern Italy. The fighting is chaotic, brutal, and exhausting. Otho's forces fight hard. For a moment, victory seems possible. Then it slips away. The battle is lost. Otho retreats. His generals insist the war isn't over. Reinforcements are coming. Vitellius can still be defeated. Rome has seen reversals before. Civil wars often last years. Otho listens. Then he does something no one expects. He refuses. Otho looks at the situation and decides that another prolonged civil war will tear the empire apart. More cities burned, more Roman killing Roman, more chaos layered on chaos. So he makes a decision that is almost unthinkable in Roman imperial history. He steps aside.
Quietly, calmly, Otho ends his own life in April 69 CE, after just 3 months as emperor. No dramatic speeches, no palace siege, just a deliberate choice to stop the bloodshed. His final words reportedly express concern not for himself, but for Rome. The reaction is stunned silence. The army mourns him, soldiers weep openly, the Senate is shaken, even his enemies respect the act. For once, an emperor places the state above his own survival. It doesn't save the empire from further chaos, but it sets Otho apart forever. He becomes something rare in Roman history, a ruler remembered kindly. Vitellius marches on Rome from the north and takes the throne, and for a brief moment, people tell themselves the worst is over. They are, of course, wrong, because Vitellius is about to show Rome what happens when indulgence, cruelty, and incompetence combine with absolute power. And the year of the 4 emperors isn't finished yet. Not even close. Aulus Vitellius is born in 15 CE into a respectable but unremarkable family. He is not shaped by hardship. He is not sharpened by discipline. He grows up comfortably, surrounded by connections, expectations, and very few consequences. He learns early that proximity to power matters more than competence. Rome will reward familiarity as long as you don't ask too many questions. Vitellius drifts through early life attached to the imperial household. He flatters the right people. He entertains. He remembers birthdays. He understands that in Rome, survival often comes down to being pleasant enough to not be removed. Physically, Vitellius is indulgent. Ancient sources linger on this point because Romans love moral symbolism. He is described as heavy, slow, fond of luxury, and deeply committed to eating well at all times. This will become important, tragically so. Despite all this, Vitellius holds military commands, not because he's brilliant, but because he's inoffensive. Soldiers don't fear him. Senators don't feel threatened. He's the kind of man people underestimate without bothering to hate. Which, in the chaos after Nero, turns out to be enough. When Galba falls and Otho takes the throne, the legions on the Rhine are already restless. They've been fighting for years. They're hardened, disciplined, and very aware of their own power. They don't trust Rome. They don't trust the Senate, and they certainly don't trust emperors chosen without their input. Vitellius happens to be their commander, and, more importantly, he lets them feel important. His officers encourage rebellion. The troops declare Vitellius emperor. He doesn't refuse. He doesn't hesitate. He accepts with a kind of stunned gratitude, like a man who has just realized the room expects him to give a speech. Vitellius marches south slowly, very slowly. He indulges in massive banquets along the way. The army pillages, discipline slips, towns suffer. Vitellius doesn't intervene much. He believes generosity will buy loyalty. Rome is already nervous. Then Otho dies. Vitellius becomes emperor by default. When he finally enters Rome, the city braces itself. At first, things seem manageable. Vitellius restores honors. He speaks respectfully of Otho. He promises peace. He distributes rewards to the soldiers who made him emperor. This, however, drains the treasury almost immediately. Vitellius responds with creativity, mostly by confiscating wealth from enemies, real or imagined. And then he settles in. Vitellius eats. He eats constantly, publicly, lavishly. Entire days are structured around meals. Banquets stretch from morning into night. Exotic foods are shipped from across the empire. Rome watches its emperor consume fortunes while the state teeters. This isn't just gluttony, it's symbolism. Vitellius treats power as consumption. Rome exists to feed him, financially, politically, emotionally. Offices are sold, positions are traded. Justice bends toward whoever can pay. The imperial court becomes a marketplace with better curtains. The soldiers who supported him grow unruly. They expect reward, not restraint. Discipline collapses. Violence spills into the streets. Rome becomes occupied territory, controlled by men who don't see it as home. The Senate is humiliated. Vitellius excludes them from decisions. He mocks their concerns. He governs impulsively, surrounded by favorites who tell him what he wants to hear. Nero's excesses look theatrical by comparison. Vitellius's are banal. And here's the problem. While Vitellius is eating his way through Rome, the eastern provinces are doing something familiar. They are choosing their own emperor. His name is Vespasian. Vespasian is nothing like Vitellius. He is disciplined, practical, experienced. He commands legions hardened by years of war, and most dangerously, he understands logistics, loyalty, and patience. The Eastern legions declare Vespasian emperor in mid-69 CE. Vitellius dismisses it. This is a mistake. He underestimates Vespasian's allies. He underestimates how tired Rome is. He underestimates that armies, once set in motion, do not stop because an emperor is full. Vespasian doesn't rush. He lets others move first. His generals advance methodically. Cities fall. Supports shifts. Rome begins to whisper again. Vitellius panics.
He tries to abdicate, then changes his mind, then tries again. The Senate, exhausted and frightened, wavers. The Praetorian Guard switches sides. Vitellius's supporters melt away. His authority collapses almost overnight. Rome erupts into street fighting. Fires burn, buildings collapse, temples are damaged. Roman fights Roman again, and the city groans under the weight of yet another civil war. Vitellius hides in the palace, then tries to flee, then hides again. Eventually, soldiers find him. Dragged through the streets, humiliated, beaten, mocked, Vitellius experiences Rome's judgment firsthand. The crowd that once watched him feast now watches him fall. He is killed near the Forum. His body is thrown into the Tiber. Vitellius reigns for about 8 months. Few mourn him. The year of the 4 emperors ends not with relief, but with exhaustion. Rome has burned through Galba, Otho, and Vitellius like disposable tools. The empire feels fragile, tired, dangerous. But out of the chaos, something different emerges. Not a performer, not a moralist, not a glutton. A builder, a survivor. Next, Rome meets Vespasian, a man who will restore stability not with grandeur, but with competence. And after everything Rome has endured, competence will feel revolutionary. Vespasian is born Titus Flavius Vespasianus in 9 CE, in a modest equestrian family from the Italian countryside. Unlike his predecessors, he is not born into the glittering Julio-Claudian dynasty. He doesn't have golden lineage or a mother constantly scheming to place him on a throne. Instead, he inherits something far more useful: practicality, patience, and a stubborn streak that will save Rome from itself. Early in life, Vespasian proves unremarkable to the historians who later write about him. He isn't flamboyant, doesn't throw lavish parties, and has no obsession with performing arts. He studies, he serves, he marries a woman named Flavia Domitilla, and raises children, teaching them discipline and duty. This will come in handy later. By the time the chaos of 69 CE, the infamous year of the 4 emperors, hits Rome, Vespasian is commanding legions in Judea. He spent years leading troops, fighting rebellions, and proving his mettle in difficult conditions. His soldiers respect him. He's fair, strategic, and unusually focused on logistics. In short, he's the opposite of Vitellius. When the Eastern legions declare Vespasian emperor, he doesn't rush south. He waits. He plans. He consolidates support. He communicates with provincial governors and senators, making it clear that his claim is legitimate, disciplined, and meant to restore stability. Rome has had too much drama. The people are desperate for calm. Meanwhile, Vitellius is still in the city, eating, indulging, and ignoring the growing threat. Vespasian's generals march strategically, not recklessly. They secure key positions and win smaller battles, while Vitellius's troops, undisciplined and overconfident, falter. Eventually, the two forces converge. Rome becomes a battlefield once more. Streets are barricaded, temples are damaged, fires flare, citizens flee or hide in fear. And yet, Vespasian's strategy is precise. Unlike Nero or Vitellius, he doesn't need spectacle. He relies on preparation, timing, and loyalty. Vitellius collapses under the pressure. Soldiers abandon him. The city turns against him. By December 69 CE, Vitellius is dead. Rome, battered, exhausted, and hungry for order, finally has an emperor who isn't a disaster in waiting. Vespasian enters Rome not with grand speeches, singing, or absurd demands. He arrives with a clear plan. He restores order, rebuilds the city, and begins a reign that will stabilize the empire for decades. Taxes are collected efficiently, the army is disciplined, corruption is punished, but reasonably. Justice is slow but fair. Rome breathes again. But here's the interesting part. Vespasian is not particularly loved by the people. He's not charismatic, he's not dramatic, he's practical. His appeal is in competence, not spectacle. Romans are confused. They expect emperors to be flashy, terrifying, or ridiculous. Instead, they get a man who balances the books, restores peace, and survives. Vespasian also has a darkly practical side. He punishes enemies, removes threats quietly, and ensures his family's position is secure. His sons Titus and Domitian are educated and prepared for succession. Vespasian understands that legacy matters more than applause.
One of his lasting projects is monumental. He begins the construction of the Colosseum, a symbol of Rome's enduring power. Unlike Nero's Golden House, this project is public, monumental, and functional. It represents the empire itself, grand, disciplined, and capable of withstanding chaos. Vespasian rules until 79 CE, dying of natural causes, remarkably anticlimactic after the previous decades of blood, betrayal, and disaster. For once, Rome experiences a smooth transition. His son Titus succeeds him, marking the first peaceful handover in decades. And so, after years of absurdity, chaos, and emperors who entertained themselves at the expense of the state, Rome finally has stability, order, and competence. Vespasian's reign shows that sometimes the quiet, practical man is the most revolutionary of all.
Titus Flavius Vespasianus, son of Vespasian, is born in 39 CE in a Rome that is not particularly forgiving. He grows up under the shadow of his father, a disciplined and practical man who always emphasizes duty over indulgence. Unlike the Julio-Claudians, Titus does not have the luxury of endless scandals, intrigue, or infamous performance art. He has an example, a father who knows exactly how to survive the maelstrom of Roman politics and leave a legacy that outlives the disaster-prone emperors before him. But being the son of a competent man comes with its own kind of pressure. Titus is ambitious, intelligent, and quick to learn, but he also inherits Rome's emotional baggage. The city's citizens are cautious, the senators are wary, and the military is still recovering from the loyalties tested and broken under Nero, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius. The empire is exhausted, and everyone is watching Titus carefully. One misstep, one indulgence, and he could unravel everything his father built. Titus first becomes widely known for his military skill. He participates in his father's campaigns in Judea, where the Jewish revolt is raging. He proves to be competent, methodical, and surprisingly humane by Roman standards. While the legions march, fight, and destroy, Titus maintains discipline and order within his own command. Soldiers respect him, not just because he's Vespasian's son, but because he demonstrates the kind of courage and practical thinking they can trust. This period is dark and tragic, as the war in Judea is brutal. Rome eventually destroys Jerusalem in 70 CE, razes the temple, and suppresses the revolt. Titus oversees the destruction with efficiency, ensuring the empire's control is unquestioned. Yet there is also a personal toll. He witnesses the suffering of civilians, soldiers, and religious leaders alike. The event leaves an imprint on him, shaping his later approach to governance with a cautious empathy that is rare in Rome. By 79 CE, Vespasian dies of natural causes, leaving Titus to inherit an empire that is structurally sound but still emotionally fragile. People are watching, as always. Senators are suspicious, citizens remember the excesses of Nero, soldiers remember the chaos of Vitellius. Rome is essentially a powder keg disguised as a functioning state. And Titus? Titus tries to be the man Rome needs. He begins his reign with measured generosity and visible competence. Taxes are fair. Public games are organized to boost morale. Grain distributions resume reliably. Cities that suffered under the previous emperors see public works rebuilt. The Colosseum, begun under Vespasian, is inaugurated with massive celebrations. This is symbolic. Rome is not only being restored physically, but psychologically. Citizens can imagine stability again, even if history suggests it's temporary. Titus's approach to leadership is interesting because it blends the practical with the personal. Unlike Vitellius, he does not indulge himself. Unlike Nero, he does not crave applause. He quietly attends to both civic duties and public perception, understanding that Rome's fragile trust must be maintained. He also gains popularity among the army by ensuring soldiers are rewarded promptly and fairly, a lesson learned from observing Vitellius's disastrous indulgence and Otho's brief caution. But Rome is rarely kind to even the most careful ruler. In 79 CE, a major natural disaster strikes, the eruption of Mount Vesuvius. Pompeii and Herculaneum are buried under ash, thousands die,
cities are destroying. Titus responds with what we might call hands-on empathy for a Roman emperor. He coordinates relief efforts, distributes funds from the imperial treasury, and personally oversees aid to the survivors. While his reputation grows as a compassionate ruler, the scale of the disaster is enormous. Rome, ever dramatic, now has its first natural catastrophe under the Flavian dynasty. And the tragedies don't stop there. In 80 CE, a fire breaks out in Rome itself. Houses, temples, and public spaces are damaged. Again, Titus responds quickly, personally supervising relief and reconstruction. Citizens are impressed, but the repeated disasters weigh on the emperor psychologically. Imagine inheriting a stable empire and immediately being told through fire and ash that nothing is permanent. For a man who values order and discipline, it's exhausting.
Then comes the Colosseum's inauguration, which is a spectacle that lasts hundreds of days. Gladiatorial games, wild animal hunts, and naval reenactments are staged in the massive amphitheater. Unlike Nero, Titus uses it not for personal vanity, but for public morale. The games cost vast amounts of money, but citizens are entertained, soldiers are celebrated, and the city's spirit is lifted. It is one of the few times in Roman history when extravagance serves a practical purpose, uniting a recovering society. Titus is remembered for his fairness, intelligence, and measured empathy. He maintains his father's policies while softening some of the harsher aspects of Roman rule. He's approachable, often visiting temples, public gatherings, and games without excessive pomp. Yet there is darkness beneath the surface. His family, like all Roman dynasties, is haunted by tragedy. His brother, Domitian, who will later become emperor, is ambitious and unpredictable. The shadow of succession looms, and Titus understands that power in Rome is always temporary. Despite his competence, Titus's reign is short. In 81 CE, he dies unexpectedly, possibly from fever or poisoning, though sources differ. Rome mourns. Public grief is widespread, unusual for a city accustomed to cynical survival. Citizens remember his generosity, soldiers remember his fairness, and historians note the contrast between Titus and the disaster-prone emperors before him. He ruled only 2 years, yet managed to stabilize Rome, respond to natural disasters with empathy, and leave the city functioning better than when he inherited it. Titus's death leaves the throne to his brother, Domitian, and here the story shifts. Domitian is ambitious, paranoid, and meticulous in ways that unsettle both the Senate and the people. The calm and competence of Vespasian and Titus will give way to an emperor whose obsession with control will create tension, fear, and eventual assassination. But for now, Rome breathes. For 2 short years, it experiences leadership that balances power with empathy, efficiency with fairness. Citizens may not fully understand it, but history notes it. Titus, the emperor who inherited disaster and tried to smile anyway. And next we'll dive into Domitian, whose paranoia, cruelty, and obsession with control will remind Rome why absolute power is always dangerous, even after careful emperors like Vespasian and Titus. Born in 51 CE, Titus Flavius Flavianus is the younger son of Vespasian. Unlike his older brother Titus, who learned empathy in the crucible of disasters, Domitian grows up observing power as absolute, transactional, and often terrifying. He's intelligent, disciplined, and physically robust, but he is also deeply insecure, constantly aware that his position as a younger son makes him second in line. Rome's history of assassinations, conspiracies, and betrayals is not abstract to him, it is a blueprint. Domitian's early years are a combination of education, military experience, and family observation. He watches his father consolidate power after the chaos of 69 CE, learning what works and what doesn't. He sees Titus respond to crises with empathy and efficiency. And he also observes one unchangeable truth. In Rome, power is never safe. It is precarious, and enemies lurk everywhere. When Titus dies in 81 CE, Domitian assumes the throne at age 30. He inherits an empire that is stable, disciplined, and after years of turmoil, relatively content. Citizens are cautiously optimistic. Senators hope for continued calm. Soldiers expect fair treatment based on the previous reigns. Domitian begins with competence. He strengthens the economy, enforces laws, and secures the frontiers.
Rome's finances stabilize under his administration, and he begins public works, including rebuilding portions of the city damaged by previous disasters. Initially, he maintains a balance between imperial authority and civic responsibility. Citizens admire him, at least superficially. But Rome is unpredictable, and so is Domitian. Beneath his disciplined exterior lies a profound insecurity. He distrusts the Senate, suspicious of their whispers, their political networks, and their historical willingness to conspire. Unlike Titus, who earned loyalty through empathy, Domitian assumes loyalty must be commanded, or it will be treasonous. This paranoia shapes his reign. He creates a network of informers, spies who report on senators, advisors, and military commanders. Treason trials multiply, executions become public spectacles. Fear, rather than admiration, becomes the currency of governance. Domitian does not rule alone, he rules through terror. The Senate despises him. They quietly refer to him as a tyrant. Domitian, aware of their disdain, increasingly bypasses their authority, governing autocratically. He issues edicts, enforces laws, and interprets justice according to his own judgment. Publicly, he remains visible and ceremonious, attending games, ceremonies, and religious festivals. Privately, he meticulously removes threats, real or imagined. Domitian's relationship with the army is more cautious. Unlike Vitellius, who overindulged soldiers, or Nero, who alternated between fear and bribery, Domitian ensures loyalty through consistent pay, discipline, and reward. Soldiers respect him. They fear him, but fear is often more effective than admiration in maintaining control. Despite his tyranny, Domitian demonstrates administrative skill. He improves tax collection, strengthens border defenses, and reorganizes the provincial administration to reduce corruption. Rome functions efficiently under his rule, even as terror permeates the political elite. He is not incompetent, in fact, he's remarkably capable, but capability alone does not win friends. Domitian's personal life is tense and controlled. He marries Domitia Longina, but the relationship is politically motivated. He is suspicious, often cruel, and intensely private. The imperial family is closely monitored, and anyone perceived as a rival or potential conspirator is eliminated or marginalized. Public gossip spreads of his harshness, secret executions, and obsession with control. Whether exaggerated or accurate, the fear is real. Over time, Domitian's paranoia escalates. Senators are accused of trivial offenses, public trials serve as warnings, informers are rewarded, even minor missteps are punished severely. Loyalty is never assumed, it must be proven repeatedly. Domitian's court becomes a labyrinth of fear, and few survive unscathed. After nearly 15 years on the throne, the tension reaches a breaking point. In 96 CE, a conspiracy forms among court officials, including members of his own household. They infiltrate the palace. On September 18, 96 CE, Domitian is assassinated in his private chambers, stabbed, suffocated, and betrayed by the people he trusted least but controlled most. Rome reacts with relief and shock. The Senate celebrates, declaring Domitian a tyrant, erasing his memory from public monuments. Yet history remembers his reign as a mix of terror and competence, an emperor who stabilized the empire administratively but ruled through fear, suspicion, and ruthless efficiency. Domitian's death marks the end of the Flavian dynasty's direct rule, leaving Rome in the hands of senators who attempt to restore traditional authority. But the lessons of Domitian's reign linger. Power is fragile, loyalty is conditional, and absolute control often breeds paranoia, fear, and eventual downfall. Next, we'll explore the era of the 5 good emperors, beginning with Nerva, whose reign shifts Rome from paranoia and terror to a rare period of cautious stability, wisdom, and governance based on merit rather than bloodline. This is Marcus Cocceius Nerva, born in 30 CE into a respected but not particularly ambitious family. He grows up in Rome during the reign of emperors like Claudius and Nero, witnessing political murders, palace intrigues, and the constant rise and fall of families. Unlike Domitian or Nero, Nerva's path to power is not fueled by ambition or spectacle. It is fueled by survival, competence, and reputation for fairness. By the time he reaches adulthood, Nerva has carved a niche in Roman politics as a cautious administrator. He serves as consul, senator, and advisor under various emperors, always careful to maintain loyalty without overstepping. He survives Domitian's paranoia, managing to avoid the pitfalls that claimed so many of his peers. This ability to navigate danger quietly becomes his defining characteristic. When Domitian is assassinated in 96 CE, Rome is in shock. Senators breathe easier, soldiers watch warily, and citizens hope for relief from fear. Nerva, at age 66, is proclaimed emperor, not by the army, not by a coup, but by the Senate. The choice is deliberate. Nerva is elderly, cautious, and unlikely to pursue personal power at the expense of stability. The Senate hopes he will restore order while leaving their influence intact. Nerva's reign begins carefully. He avoids indulgence, extravagance, or rash decisions. Publicly, he presents himself as a stabilizing figure. He pardons those previously punished under Domitian, recalls exiles, and begins reforms aimed at repairing the damage caused by years of terror. This includes financial relief for impoverished citizens, land redistribution programs, and efforts to curb corruption among provincial governors. But Nerva's biggest challenge is the military. Unlike emperors like Domitian or Vitellius, Nerva does not command legions personally. He is a civil administrator, accustomed to diplomacy, negotiation, and prudence, not battlefield leadership. The army, loyal to Domitian's memory and wary of a weak emperor, begins to question his authority. Early in his reign, this tension comes to a head. A revolt by the Praetorian Guard, the very force that once determined the fate of so many emperors, threatens Nerva's position. Soldiers demand stricter rewards, better pay, and a more forceful leader. Nerva negotiates. He distributes bonuses, promises reforms, and demonstrates political flexibility. He survives, but the incident underscores a crucial lesson. An emperor's survival depends not just on wisdom, but on controlling the army's loyalty. To secure Rome's future beyond his own reign, Nerva makes a radical decision: adoption. He adopts Trajan, a general respected by legions and provinces alike, as his heir. This move is unprecedented in its implications. Nerva cannot rely on bloodline alone. He must ensure succession through merit, military approval, and administrative competence. Trajan embodies all three. With this adoption, Nerva shifts the political culture of Rome. He demonstrates that the empire can function based on skill, loyalty, and foresight, rather than hereditary privilege or brute force. It is a subtle but profound change, one that sets the stage for what historians later call the era of the 5 good emperors.
Nerva's personal life is quiet. He marries modestly, avoids scandal, and maintains a reputation for integrity. Unlike Domitian, he rules without terror. Unlike Nero, he rules without indulgence. His approach is pragmatic. Rome is fragile, and a steady hand is more valuable than spectacle or cruelty. However, Nerva's reign is not long. At age 66, his health is failing. After just 2 years, he dies of natural causes in 98 CE. The transition to Trajan is smooth, almost shockingly so, thanks to the careful groundwork he laid. Citizens, soldiers, and senators alike accept Trajan without bloodshed or rebellion, a rarity in Roman history. Nerva's legacy is subtle but enduring. He proves that competence, prudence, and foresight can stabilize an empire even after decades of terror and chaos. More importantly, he establishes the principle that an emperor can choose his successor based on merit rather than birth, a lesson that will guide Rome for decades. Next, we'll dive into Trajan, the soldier emperor whose reign expands the empire to its greatest territorial extent, proving that Rome can be both disciplined and ambitious when the right person holds power. This is Marcus Ulpius Traianus, or as history simply calls him, Trajan. Trajan is born in 53 CE in Italica, a Roman colony in Hispania Baetica, modern Spain. Yes, the empire is no longer just centered in Rome. Provincial elites are climbing the ladder of power.
Trajan's family is wealthy, politically connected, and military-minded, but not of the old senatorial nobility. This gives him a unique perspective. He understands both the center of Roman politics and the periphery, which will become crucial for his reign. From a young age, Trajan is trained in military discipline, administration, and leadership. He demonstrates intelligence, courage, and strategic thinking that impress his mentors and the legions he commands. By his 30s, he is already recognized as a capable general, serving in Germania and on the Danube frontier. Soldiers respect him not just for his competence, but for his fairness, discipline, and willingness to share the hardships of the campaign. Unlike Nero or Vitellius, who indulged themselves while their troops suffered, Trajan eats with them, marches with them, and even sleeps in the field when necessary. When Nerva adopts Trajan in 97 CE, the move is immediately seen as both wise and strategic. Nerva cannot rely on birthright. The empire's stability depends on military approval, administrative skill, and popular legitimacy. Trajan embodies all three. Soldiers cheer, senators are cautiously optimistic, citizens are intrigued. Some whisper that the empire may finally have an emperor who can do everything right. Trajan ascends to the throne in 98 CE, a man in his mid-40s, confident, disciplined, and politically savvy. His first act is to consolidate the empire. Unlike Domitian, he does not rule through terror. Unlike Nero, he does not crave applause or indulgence. He immediately restores relations with the Senate, reassures provincial governors, and begins reviewing Rome's financial and military policies. His approach is deliberate and meticulous. But Trajan's defining characteristic is ambition. He is not content with stability alone. He wants Rome to be the greatest empire the world has ever seen. This is where his military genius becomes evident. He launches campaigns along the Danube frontier, strengthening borders and subduing rebellious tribes. The empire's northern and eastern boundaries are secured with a combination of force, diplomacy, and infrastructure. Roads are built, forts established, and supply lines perfected. By 101 CE, Trajan turns his attention to Dacia, a region north of the Danube in modern Romania. The Dacians, led by King Decebalus, have resisted Roman domination for decades, raiding provinces and challenging Roman authority. Trajan sees this as both a military and symbolic objective. He launches a full-scale campaign, carefully planning logistics, troop movements, and siege tactics. Over multiple years, Roman legions slowly wear down Dacian resistance. Trajan's attention to engineering, building bridges, fortifications, and siege engines, is legendary. He personally oversees operations, inspiring his troops through presence and competence rather than fear. The Dacian wars are brutal. Thousands die, cities are destroyed, and the Roman treasury is heavily invested. Yet Trajan is meticulous. He rewards soldiers, manages supply lines, and ensures that Roman control over conquered territory is secure. By 106 CE, Dacia falls, Decebalus is defeated, and the region becomes a Roman province. Trajan celebrates with triumphs in Rome, parades, and monumental construction, including bridges and roads to integrate Dacia into the empire. This victory is symbolic. Rome has expanded, borders are secured, and Trajan has proven himself as both general and administrator. Trajan's reign is not only about conquest, it is also about infrastructure and public welfare. He constructs the famous Trajan's Forum in Rome, a sprawling complex including temples, basilicas, and public spaces. The Trajan's Market is built nearby, functioning as a commercial and administrative hub. He commissions roads, aqueducts, and public buildings across the empire, ensuring that Rome's influence is both cultural and practical. Citizens and visitors alike marvel at the scale and utility of his projects.
But expansion comes with challenges. Trajan pushes the empire's boundaries further east, launching campaigns into Mesopotamia. These campaigns are initially successful, capturing cities and establishing Roman control. Yet the distances are vast, supply lines long, and troops stretched thin. Trajan's advisors warn him of overextension, but he balances ambition with strategy.
Unlike reckless predecessors, he knows when to consolidate gains rather than press further, ensuring that Rome's hold remains strong without risking collapse. Domestically, Trajan is also remarkably pragmatic. He reviews tax systems, ensures fair treatment of provincials, and maintains a careful relationship with the Senate. Unlike Domitian, he does not rule through fear. Unlike Nero, he does not rely on spectacle. His popularity with soldiers, provincials, and citizens is genuine, earned through competence, fairness, and tangible results. Even Trajan's personal life is a study in pragmatism. He marries Pompeia Plotina, a woman renowned for her virtue and wisdom, whose counsel he values deeply. Plotina is influential behind the scenes, advocating for justice, public welfare, and moderation. Trajan listens, demonstrating that effective leadership sometimes requires humility and counsel. Despite his successes, challenges remain. Wars are costly, governance across a vast empire is complex, and maintaining loyalty among diverse populations is never easy. Trajan's solution is consistent oversight, attention to detail, and delegation to capable officials. He understands the limits of his own presence and cultivates a network of loyal, competent governors and generals. Trajan dies in 117 CE during a campaign in the east, leaving an empire at its territorial peak, administratively stable and culturally unified. His succession is smooth as he adopts Hadrian, a man of intellect, experience, and loyalty, ensuring continuity. Trajan's legacy is monumental. He expanded Rome further than any emperor before or after, built lasting infrastructure, and demonstrated that ambition, when balanced with prudence, can elevate an empire to unprecedented heights. Trajan's story reminds us that Rome's greatest rulers were not merely survivors or entertainers. They were planners, soldiers, and builders who understood the delicate balance of power, loyalty, and legacy. Next, we'll explore Hadrian, the thinker emperor, whose reign shifts Rome from expansion to consolidation, demonstrating that controlling an empire is sometimes more important than swords. This is Publius Aelius Hadrianus, or simply Hadrian, the thinker emperor who decided walls were sometimes more important than swords. Hadrian is born in 76 CE in Italica, the same Roman colony in Hispania that produced Trajan. Yes, Rome has already proven that provincial elites can produce emperors capable of reshaping the world. Hadrian's family is wealthy, well-connected, and politically ambitious, yet not entrenched in the old senatorial aristocracy. This gives Hadrian a perspective of both insider knowledge and outsider observation, a combination that proves powerful later. As a young man, Hadrian is educated in law, rhetoric, and military discipline. He studies literature and philosophy, absorbing Greek thought alongside traditional Roman values. By the time he reaches adulthood, he is not only competent in administration and warfare, but also deeply reflective, a rarity in an empire often defined by spectacle, brutality, and impulsive ambition. Hadrian's early career unfolds under the reign of Trajan. He serves in various military and administrative roles, gaining respect among soldiers and officials alike. Trajan is impressed by Hadrian's intelligence and loyalty, eventually arranging for him to marry Vibia Sabina, further cementing his political prominence. Despite being Trajan's adopted heir, Hadrian's rise is not automatic. It requires recognition of skill, judgment, and political acumen. When Trajan dies in 117 CE, Hadrian assumes the throne, inheriting the largest empire Rome has ever seen. Its borders stretch from Britain to the Euphrates, from the Rhine to North Africa. Administratively, the empire is functional, but it is unwieldy. Provinces are distant, communication is slow, and diverse populations bring unique challenges. Hadrian understands immediately that unchecked expansion is dangerous. Maintaining control is far more important than adding new territory. This is where Hadrian's philosophy of rule becomes clear. Unlike Trajan, whose reign is defined by conquest and martial glory, Hadrian focuses on consolidation, diplomacy, and infrastructure. His first major project is a tour of the provinces, traveling for years through Greece, Asia Minor, Egypt, Judea, Gaul, and Britain. He meets governors, inspects troops, reviews taxes, and listens to complaints. He observes firsthand what makes the empire stable and what threatens its cohesion. Hadrian's travels are not leisurely vacations. They are calculated inspections, lessons in governance, and exercises in loyalty building. Citizens and soldiers alike note his presence, often responding with genuine respect. Unlike Domitian, he rules without terror. Unlike Vitellius, he does not indulge. His authority derives from competence, visibility, and fairness. One of Hadrian's most famous projects arises from his inspections in Britain, Hadrian's Wall. The wall isn't a defensive extravagance for conquest, it's a practical solution to ongoing raids and border instability. Stretching across northern Britain, it fortifies the frontier, regulates trade, and symbolizes the empire's strength. Hadrian personally oversees construction, ensuring that engineering, logistics, and manpower are optimized.
Soldiers stationed along the wall are disciplined and well-provisioned, and the wall itself becomes a lasting monument to Roman organization. But Hadrian's consolidation is not limited to borders. He invests heavily in infrastructure, roads, aqueducts, bridges, and public buildings. Cities in the provinces receive forums, theaters, and administrative centers. His architectural projects are both functional and symbolic, demonstrating Roman order, culture, and permanence. He even rebuilds portions of Athens, reflecting his admiration for Greek culture while projecting Roman authority. Hadrian's reign also involves sensitive diplomacy. Unlike Trajan, he does not seek to expand into Parthia aggressively, understanding that overextension could weaken the empire. Instead, he negotiates borders, solidifies treaties, and emphasizes cultural integration. Hadrian encourages local elites to adopt Roman customs while respecting regional traditions, fostering loyalty without force. Religious and cultural policy under Hadrian is complex. He is a patron of the arts, philosophy, and literature, but he is also pragmatic in governance. He suppresses revolts, including the Bar Kokhba revolt in Judea, decisively and brutally, while learning from mistakes made in previous Jewish rebellions. His approach blends military discipline with administrative insight, minimizing long-term destabilization even amid necessary violence. Hadrian's life is as fascinating as his governance. He is deeply devoted to Antinous, a young Greek companion whose death profoundly affects him. Hadrian deifies Antinous, founding cities, erecting statues, and integrating his memory into imperial culture. While this act may seem personal, it also demonstrates Hadrian's ability to fuse private devotion with public policy, using culture and religion to unify and inspire the empire. Despite his achievements, Hadrian is not without paranoia. Like many emperors before him, he monitors potential threats, including ambitious generals, senators, and family members. Trials for treason occur, but Hadrian is more measured than Domitian, using intelligence and strategy rather than terror as his primary tool. Loyalty is rewarded, incompetence corrected, and rebellion punished decisively but strategically. Hadrian's reign lasts nearly 21 years, one of the longest in Roman history. He stabilizes the empire, secures its borders, reforms administration, and leaves a lasting architectural and cultural legacy. He is not remembered for conquest alone, but for creating an empire that is defensible, administratively sound, and culturally integrated. His approach contrasts sharply with predecessors who relied on spectacle, terror, or indulgence. Hadrian rules through foresight, intelligence, and pragmatic governance. By the time of his death in 138 CE, Hadrian has transformed Rome. The empire is enormous, stable, and well-governed. Citizens benefit from infrastructure and relative peace. The military is disciplined and strategically deployed. Provinces are integrated culturally and politically.
Most importantly, Hadrian establishes a model of governance that emphasizes consolidation, competence, and strategic foresight over raw expansion or terror. Hadrian's legacy is enduring. He is remembered as one of the 5 good emperors, a period in which Rome achieved unprecedented stability, administrative excellence, and cultural development. Unlike the chaos of the Julio-Claudians or the terror of Domitian, Hadrian demonstrates that the empire can thrive not just through conquest, but through planning, consolidation, and intelligent leadership. Next, we'll move on to Antoninus Pius, whose reign represents the pinnacle of peace, administrative refinement, and the subtle, almost invisible art of ruling without making enemies, or at least without making many. Enter Antoninus Pius, the emperor who seems almost boring at first glance. But here's the trick. Ruling without chaos is far harder than ruling with it. Antoninus Pius isn't flashy, he doesn't parade around in purple robes demanding attention, and yet his reign becomes one of the most peaceful and prosperous periods in Roman history. Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, or Antoninus Pius as he's commonly called, is born in 86 CE in Lanuvium, a town just outside Rome. Unlike previous emperors from distant provinces, he comes from a well-connected family of Roman senators. His upbringing is steeped in law, civic responsibility, and the subtleties of politics. From an early age, he learns that survival in Rome depends not on spectacle, violence, or indulgence, but on competence, discretion, and alliances. Antoninus's early career is carefully cultivated. He serves as consul, governor, and senator under Hadrian, gaining experience in administration, provincial governance, and military oversight. Unlike Nero or Domitian, he does not seek the limelight or popularity through extravagance. Instead, he focuses on learning how to manage the machinery of the empire. This might sound dull, but in a city where emperors die violently or are overthrown with regularity, competence is radical. When Hadrian dies in 138 CE, Antoninus is chosen as emperor, partly because Hadrian trusts him, and partly because the Senate sees him as a safe, stabilizing choice. The adoption by Hadrian is symbolic. It ensures continuity without bloodshed, signaling to the army, Senate, and provinces that Rome can continue without chaos. Antoninus assumes the throne at age 52, an age that already suggests experience and prudence.
Antoninus's reign begins with subtle but important reforms. He avoids dramatic speeches, flashy parades, or extravagant games, though he does host public spectacles to keep the population content. Instead, he focuses on law, justice, and administration. Governors are monitored for corruption, soldiers are paid on time, provinces are surveyed and managed for efficiency. Unlike Domitian, he rules without fear. Unlike Vitellius, he rules without indulgence. His authority derives from trust, competence, and predictability. One of Antoninus's defining traits is his legal reform. He issues laws aimed at protecting widows, orphans, and slaves from abuse, improving conditions for everyday citizens. Courts are reformed to ensure fairness. Provincial governors are held accountable but not publicly humiliated. Citizens and elites alike begin to see Rome as a state where law matters more than spectacle, a radical idea in a city that has lived under paranoia and indulgence for decades. Antoninus is also deeply committed to public works. Roads are repaired, aqueducts maintained, and temples restored. Unlike Hadrian, who focused on architectural grandeur, Antoninus prioritizes functionality and maintenance. Cities across the empire benefit from reliable infrastructure, which strengthens trade, communication, and military logistics. These improvements are subtle, but their effects ripple across the empire, stabilizing regions that previously teetered on the edge of rebellion. Military policy under Antoninus is cautious but effective. Unlike Trajan, he does not pursue aggressive expansion. Instead, he secures borders, reinforces fortifications, and focuses on defense. The Antonine Wall in Britain is constructed to stabilize the northern frontier, providing security without overextending resources. Soldiers are disciplined, supplied, and treated fairly, reducing the risk of mutiny.
His approach contrasts sharply with previous emperors who relied on fear, spectacle, or indulgence to maintain loyalty. Antoninus's personal life mirrors his political philosophy. He marries Faustina the Elder, forming a stable household that models Roman virtues. He is not known for indulgence, excessive luxury, or scandal. Instead, he demonstrates that emperors can wield power without theatrics, cruelty, or indulgence. Citizens observe a ruler who governs responsibly, listens to advisors, and ensures that Rome functions smoothly. Despite the peaceful nature of his reign, Antoninus faces challenges. Provinces occasionally revolt, natural disasters occur, and external threats persist along the Danube and in the east. But Antoninus addresses each crisis with calm pragmatism. Rebellions are suppressed efficiently, resources allocated sensibly, and diplomacy employed wherever possible. Unlike previous emperors who might escalate or indulge in spectacle, Antoninus prioritizes stability. By the time of his death in 161 CE, Antoninus Pius has ruled for 23 years, one of the longest and most peaceful reigns in Roman history. Rome is wealthy, stable, and relatively content. The army is disciplined, the Senate is functional, and citizens experience a sense of security unknown in previous decades. His reign demonstrates that competence, foresight, and stability can achieve as much, if not more, than conquest, spectacle, or fear. Antoninus's greatest legacy may not be visible in monuments or military campaigns. It is in the culture of governance he establishes, careful, measured, and reliable. By creating a stable environment, he sets the stage for his adopted sons, Marcus Aurelius and Lucius Verus, to inherit an empire that is orderly, prosperous, and prepared for the challenges ahead. Antoninus Pius proves that in a world of violent, indulgent, and paranoid rulers, calm, consistent governance is revolutionary. Citizens may not celebrate him with the drama of Nero or the bloodlust of Domitian, but history remembers him as one of the most effective emperors Rome ever had. Next, we'll explore Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher emperor, whose reign is defined by wisdom, stoicism, and the grim realities of ruling an empire in perpetual conflict. Marcus Aurelius is born Marcus Annius Verus in 121 CE into a wealthy and politically influential Roman family. From an early age, he is groomed for leadership, receiving a rigorous education in rhetoric, law, and philosophy. His tutors emphasize stoicism, teaching him to value reason, self-control, and duty over indulgence or impulse. This philosophical foundation becomes the lens through which he approaches every decision as emperor. Unlike predecessors who relied on spectacle, fear, or brute force, Marcus is reflective and disciplined. He observes the world not just as an emperor, but as a student of human behavior. He writes constantly, notes, letters, reflections, what will later become the Meditations, a deeply personal record of Stoic thought and the internal struggle of a ruler facing impossible challenges. Marcus ascends to power in 161 CE following the death of Antoninus Pius. He is co-emperor with Lucius Verus, a man of a very different temperament. Lucius is indulgent, pleasure-seeking, and less disciplined, a sharp contrast to Marcus's stoic self-control. The joint rule is pragmatic. Marcus provides wisdom and governance, while Lucius handles armies and public affairs with a lighter touch. But from the start, Marcus is confronted with a world that refuses to pause for philosophy.
The empire's borders are under threat. Along the Danube, Germanic tribes, Marcomanni, Quadi, and Sarmatians test Roman defenses, raiding provinces and challenging authority. In the east, Parthia remains a constant concern. Marcus quickly realizes that Stoic meditation alone will not defend Rome. He must combine wisdom with military strategy, diplomacy, and relentless administration. The Marcomannic Wars, beginning in 166 CE, dominate much of Marcus's reign.
Unlike Trajan, who pursued conquest aggressively, Marcus fights primarily defensive campaigns, aiming to secure borders and protect provinces. These wars are grueling, prolonged, and draining, both financially and psychologically. Soldiers are exhausted by harsh winters, long marches, and constant skirmishes. Marcus, despite his philosophical detachment, experiences the emotional toll firsthand, often writing about the burdens of command, mortality, and the impermanence of human effort. Marcus is notable among emperors for his hands-on leadership. He travels to the front lines, inspects troops, and personally oversees logistics. He enforces discipline, rewards loyalty, and mitigates suffering where possible. Unlike Domitian, who ruled through terror, Marcus commands respect through competence, fairness, and integrity. Soldiers admire him not just as a commander, but as a man who shares the hardships of their profession. Meanwhile, Rome faces internal challenges. Plagues sweep across the empire, causing widespread mortality and economic disruption. Public order is threatened by shortages, unrest, and administrative strain. Marcus addresses these issues methodically. He organizes relief, distributes grain, and ensures that infrastructure repairs continue despite crises. His philosophical training informs his decisions. He focuses on what can be controlled, accepts what cannot, and strives to act justly in all matters. Marcus's personal life is intertwined with duty. He marries Faustina the Younger, daughter of Antoninus Pius, forming a politically secure alliance. Together, they have multiple children, though tragically, many die young, a recurring theme in Roman elite families. Marcus grieves privately, adhering to Stoic principles even while mourning. His personal losses add a human dimension to a reign otherwise dominated by state concerns. One of the remarkable aspects of Marcus's rule is his commitment to legal and administrative reform. He revises laws to protect orphans, widows, and slaves, improves provincial governance, and ensures fair taxation. Unlike emperors who rule through spectacle or oppression, Marcus relies on rational governance and moral authority. He demonstrates that virtue and competence can be effective tools of power, even in a world defined by brutality and uncertainty. Despite his philosophical temperament, Marcus is not naive. He recognizes the realities of power, betrayal, and mortality. He survives assassination attempts, navigates court intrigues, and balances the ambitions of senators, generals, and provincial elites. His writings reveal a constant inner dialogue: how to act justly, how to endure suffering, and how to lead an empire where human folly and cruelty are ever present. Marcus Aurelius's reign is also marked by cultural patronage. He encourages literature, philosophy, and arts, fostering intellectual life across the empire. Greek culture, in particular, is celebrated, reflecting his deep appreciation for Hellenistic thought. Yet this cultural engagement never distracts from the pressing demands of empire. Marcus embodies the dual role of philosopher and emperor, an ideal seldom achieved in history. By the end of his reign, in 180 CE, Marcus has faced decades of war, plague, and political challenge. The empire is intact, borders are secure, and administrative systems are strengthened, but the personal toll is immense. He dies in Vindobona, modern Vienna, on campaign along the Danube, demonstrating that even the wisest emperor cannot escape the demands of duty and the harsh realities of the Roman world. Marcus Aurelius's legacy is complex. He is remembered as the philosopher-emperor, a ruler who combined Stoic wisdom with pragmatic governance. He exemplifies leadership defined by moral reflection, competence, and personal discipline. Yet his reign also highlights the limits of virtue. Even the most capable and ethical emperor cannot eliminate war, disease, or human suffering. Marcus sets a standard for rulers that echoes through history. It is possible to govern with integrity, reason, and care, even in an empire built on conquest, fear, and violence. Yet he also shows that such governance comes at a personal cost, a lesson for leaders in any era. Next, we'll examine Commodus, Marcus's son, whose indulgence, cruelty, and obsession with spectacle plunge Rome back into chaos, showing that even the wisest upbringing cannot prevent the empire from flirting with disaster. After decades of careful, competent, and stoic rule under Marcus Aurelius, Rome finally gets the emperor it deserves, or maybe the one it has always secretly feared, Commodus. If Marcus was wisdom incarnate, Commodus is spectacle incarnate. If Marcus sought stability, Commodus seeks applause. And if Marcus accepted the burdens of duty, Commodus wants to rewrite the rules entirely.
Lucius Aurelius Commodus Antoninus, just try saying that 5 times quickly, is born in 161 CE, the same year Marcus Aurelius becomes emperor. His mother, Faustina the Younger, is from the Antonine family, while his father, Marcus, is one of the most disciplined and philosophically inclined men Rome has ever produced. One might imagine that Commodus would inherit stoicism, prudence, and integrity. One would be wrong. From the start, Commodus is indulgent, arrogant, and prone to theatricality. His tutors attempt to instill discipline, philosophy, and the importance of civic duty, but the young prince responds poorly. He enjoys luxury, craves attention, and is captivated by personal glory. Even Marcus's careful guidance cannot completely curb his worst instincts. Unlike Marcus, Commodus is charming, and he knows how to exploit charm to manipulate those around him. The seeds of disaster are planted early. When Marcus dies in 180 CE, Commodus assumes sole control. Rome, expecting a continuation of his father's stoic, disciplined governance, is immediately disoriented. Commodus indulges in extravagance, grants favors recklessly, and surrounds himself with flatterers and opportunists. Senators are wary, soldiers are cautious, citizens are entertained, confused, and occasionally horrified. Unlike his father, who ruled through respect and competence, Commodus rules through spectacle and fear. One of Commodus's defining traits is his obsession with gladiatorial games. He famously participates in the arena himself, dressing as a gladiator, fighting wild animals, and even staging elaborate reenactments of historical battles in which he always emerges as the hero. Publicly, this is thrilling. Privately, it is humiliating to the traditional Roman elite, who view such performances as unbecoming of an emperor. The boundaries between ruler and entertainer blur, and the dignity of the imperial office begins to erode. Commodus also engages in extreme self-aggrandizement. He renames Rome Colonia Commodania, rebrands months and festivals after himself, and claims identification with Hercules, adorning statues and coins with his likeness in lion skins and club-bearing poses. Essentially, he turns Rome into a personal stage, a city-sized hall of mirrors reflecting only himself. Citizens, soldiers, and senators are forced to participate in this theatricality or face consequences. Political life under Commodus is dominated by paranoia and purges. Officials who fail to flatter him sufficiently or who simply pose a potential threat are executed, exiled, or humiliated. Informers proliferate in the palace. Fear becomes the primary tool of governance, echoing the worst traits of Domitian. Unlike Domitian, however, Commodus combines terror with indulgence, creating a leadership style that is simultaneously chaotic, cruel, and unpredictable. Commodus's economic policies are inconsistent. While he spends lavishly on games, public buildings, and personal luxuries, the empire's finances strain under mismanagement. Taxes fluctuate, provincial governors are exploited, and corruption spreads as flatterers and opportunists exploit the emperor's whims. Unlike Trajan or Hadrian, who balanced ambition with practicality, Commodus pursues spectacle over sustainability. The army initially remains loyal, largely due to generous donatives and Commodus's charm. Soldiers are rewarded with bonuses, medals, and public recognition. Commodus even parades through camps dressed as Hercules, delighting some and alarming others. Yet this loyalty is superficial. As his reign progresses, his erratic behavior, obsession with personal glory, and distrust of advisors begin to alienate key military leaders, setting the stage for instability. Commodus's personal life is equally scandalous. He indulges in sexual escapades, gambling, and extravagant feasts, often blending personal gratification with public spectacle.
He surrounds himself with favorites, often freedmen or obscure courtiers, who gain influence far beyond their competence. Senators, consuls, and nobles are sidelined, humiliated, or eliminated. Rome's traditional elite structure is effectively inverted. The combination of spectacle, cruelty, and mismanagement leads to increasing instability by the mid-180s CE. Plots against the emperor emerge as senators, generals, and even family members seek to protect themselves or correct the course of governance. Commodus responds unpredictably, sometimes punishing conspirators, sometimes pardoning them for amusement. His court becomes a theater of paranoia, excess, and intrigue, eroding both public confidence and administrative effectiveness. One of Commodus's most infamous episodes of his reign is his attempt to personally fight as a gladiator in the Colosseum, where he often faced opponents who were armed with wooden weapons to ensure his victory. While he never risked his life seriously, the spectacle humiliated Rome's sense of dignity and offended traditional sensibilities. Commodus framed these performances as heroic, but they revealed an emperor more concerned with vanity than empire.
Commodus's reign also has moments of brutal repression. Senators are executed for minor infractions or imagined slights. Advisors disappear mysteriously. Provinces experience arbitrary punishments when Commodus's whims are offended. The empire functions, but only under the veneer of imperial theatrics and fear, a stark contrast to the efficient, disciplined administration of Marcus Aurelius. By the late 180 CE, Commodus's excesses provoke widespread discontent. Military commanders, senators, and palace officials begin to conspire openly. Commodus, aware of potential threats, attempts to manipulate and control the situation through spectacle, intimidation, and rewards. But his erratic behavior undermines trust. The stage is set for the inevitable, a coup. On December 31, 192 CE, Commodus is assassinated, strangled in his bath by a conspiracy of chamber officials and athletes. His death marks the end of the Nerva-Antonine dynasty and plunges Rome into renewed instability. The empire, accustomed to competence, discipline, and moral authority, now faces uncertainty, civil unrest, and the scramble for power that had plagued previous centuries. Commodus's legacy is a cautionary tale. He demonstrates how even the most carefully groomed empire can descend into chaos under a ruler obsessed with personal glory, spectacle, and indulgence. He contrasts sharply with his father, Marcus Aurelius, and predecessors like Antoninus Pius and Hadrian, illustrating that personality, temperament, and morality can shape the fate of Rome as much as military might or administrative skill. Next, we'll examine the chaotic period following Commodus's death, including the Year of the Five Emperors, civil wars, and how Rome struggles to regain stability after nearly 2 decades of indulgence, paranoia, and spectacle. After Commodus, who treated the empire like his personal playground, Rome is left exhausted, terrified, and financially strained. Citizens, soldiers, and senators alike wake up to the shocking reality: no competent, calm emperor is in charge. The year is 193 CE, and it comes to be known as the Year of the Five Emperors. Why 5? Because in 12 months, Rome sees a parade of claimants, assassinations, and rapid-fire successions that would make even the most hardened senator dizzy. Let's break down the chaos. It starts with Pertinax, the city's new hope. He is a senator and general known for discipline, integrity, and moderate reforms. The Senate, desperate to restore order, installs him immediately after Commodus's assassination. Pertinax is exactly what Rome needs in theory, a man of principle, not indulgence. He begins reforms aimed at stabilizing the treasury, disciplining the Praetorian Guard, and restoring moral authority to the imperial office. But the Praetorian Guard, Rome's elite palace soldiers who were paid to protect emperors but often sell the throne to the highest bidder, quickly lose patience. Pertinax is strict, demanding, and refuses to indulge the Guard's usual expectations for bribes and bonuses. Within 3 months, they murder him. His body is abandoned in the streets, a stark warning that virtue alone cannot secure power in Rome. The city reels from the shocking speed of his demise. With Pertinax gone, the Praetorian Guard does something unprecedented. They auction the imperial throne to the highest bidder. This is Rome's darkest moment of absurdity. Senators and citizens look on in disbelief as men with money, influence, and ambition bid to become emperor, literally paying for power. The winner is Didius Julianus, a wealthy senator who reportedly outbids everyone else to claim the throne. Julianus's reign begins with ostentation but quickly collapses. He tries to buy loyalty, bribing soldiers, granting favors, and sending gifts to provincial governors. Yet bribery cannot replace respect, competence, or legitimacy. Provincial governors and legions immediately reject him. Within weeks, Rome faces open rebellion, and multiple generals declare themselves emperor. The empire is fractured, authority is contested, and chaos reigns. Enter Pescennius Niger, governor of Syria. Niger is a capable general with strong support from eastern provinces and legions. He proclaims himself emperor, asserting that he will restore order to Rome. At the same time, Clodius Albinus, governor of Britain, also claims the throne, initially as a potential ally, but eventually as a rival. Meanwhile, Septimius Severus, commander of the Pannonian legions, marches on Rome with ambition, strategy, and decisive force. Severus proves to be the most ruthless and effective of the claimants. He quickly secures the loyalty of the Praetorian Guard by promising rewards, consolidates power in Italy, and marches east to confront Niger. Battles are fought, legions clash, and Rome becomes a war zone not in a distant province, but within the political and military heart of the empire. The streets, provinces, and borders are all affected. Niger is defeated in 194 CE at the Battle of Issus, and Severus executes him, eliminating one major rival. Albinus initially negotiates, accepting the title of Caesar under Severus, but tensions remain. The empire, already financially strained from Commodus's indulgence, now suffers from the costs of civil war. Soldiers demand payment, cities are taxed heavily, and provincial economies struggle to survive the disruption.
Meanwhile, Didius Julianus, still in Rome, is captured and executed. The auction emperor, a man whose rule was literally purchased, is now a warning to anyone who thinks wealth alone can secure the crown. His downfall is swift, bloody, and humiliating. Rome, exhausted, begins to realize that survival in this period requires both military power and cunning, not moral authority or popularity. By the end of 195 CE, Septimius Severus emerges as the uncontested ruler. He stabilizes Rome, reorganizes the army, and punishes conspirators, but the scars of the Year of the Five Emperors remain. The Senate is weakened, the city is wary, and the empire's borders have been neglected during the succession wars. The chaotic succession demonstrates the fragility of imperial authority and the central role of the military in deciding the fate of emperors. Severus's rise also marks a turning point. The principle of succession shifts further toward military power. The Senate's role diminishes, and the emperor's authority becomes inseparable from control over legions. Future emperors will learn from this chaos. Legitimacy is often secondary to the ability to command loyalty, enforce discipline, and crush rivals decisively. The Year of the Five Emperors also exposes the psychological toll of imperial instability. Citizens and elites live in fear of rapid regime changes, arbitrary executions, and unpredictable taxation. Soldiers grow accustomed to political influence, expecting rewards for loyalty rather than obeying out of duty. Rome's institutions are stressed to the limit, and only a strong, ruthless leader can restore temporary order. Yet amidst the chaos, there are lessons in strategy, pragmatism, and human behavior. Septimius Severus consolidates power by balancing rewards and fear, demonstrating that decisive action, rather than moral virtue or popularity, is crucial when the empire teeters on collapse. His campaigns against Niger and eventual confrontation with Albinus showcase the importance of military logistics, timing, and psychological manipulation. By the time Severus solidifies control, Rome has learned a harsh truth. The days of peaceful, orderly succession under the Antonines are gone. Virtuous emperors like Marcus Aurelius or Antoninus Pius are rare. The post-Commodus era favors ambition, ruthlessness, and military power above all else. The empire survives, but at a cost. Trust erodes, traditions are disrupted, and the Senate's authority continues to decline. The year of the five emperors ends with Rome temporarily stabilized under Severus, but the empire is entering a new, turbulent phase. From this point forward, succession, military loyalty, and ruthless pragmatism define the imperial office more than virtue, stoicism, or public service. Rome remains strong, but the human cost of leadership becomes increasingly apparent. Soldiers, civilians, and elites alike understand that in this game, life is fragile, power is fleeting, and emperors are both feared and despised. Next, we'll dive into Septimius Severus himself, the general emperor who transforms the imperial office, consolidates power ruthlessly, and sets the stage for the Severan dynasty, showing how Rome adapts, survives, and sometimes thrives amid chaos. If the year of the five emperors taught the empire anything, it's that power is now decided on the battlefield and in the barracks, not in the Senate or through virtue. Enter Lucius Septimius Severus, the man who rises from the chaos of 193 CE to secure the throne with ruthless efficiency, turning Rome into a machine of military discipline, political control, and dynastic ambition. Severus is born in Leptis Magna in modern Libya in 145 CE, far from the marble heart of Rome. He's a provincial, a member of a wealthy Punic family with some Roman citizenship and connections to the Senate. His upbringing in Africa gives him a perspective different from most Roman elites. He understands both the periphery and the center, the soldier and the senator, the province and the capital. It's a combination that proves deadly effective later. As a young man, he's ambitious, politically savvy, and militarily inclined. He serves in minor administrative roles, then climbs steadily through the ranks, combining law, diplomacy, and military competence. He gains recognition as a general, commanding legions along the Danube frontier and developing a reputation for discipline, strategic insight, and decisive action. Soldiers respect him, civilians fear him, elites admire him cautiously. When Commodus dies and a year of the five emperors begins, Severus is governor of Pannonia, a province that borders hostile tribes and commands several legions. Recognizing the vacuum in Rome, he marches decisively. Unlike Didius Julianus, who tried to buy loyalty, Severus secures it through a combination of promise, fear, and military prestige. Soldiers proclaim him emperor, and he moves swiftly to confront rivals. Timing, logistics, and strategic decisiveness define his rise. Severus first neutralizes Didius Julianus, the auction emperor. Julianus's death is almost anticlimactic, a reminder that wealth cannot replace authority. Then Severus moves east to confront Pescennius Niger, who has declared himself emperor in Syria. Niger enjoys substantial local support, but Severus's forces are disciplined, well-supplied, and ruthlessly commanded. The ensuing battles, including the decisive Battle of Issus in 194 CE, demonstrate Severus's military genius. Niger is defeated and executed, removing one major rival.
Meanwhile, Severus manages Clodius Albinus in Britain with a mix of diplomacy and calculated tension. Initially, Severus offers Albinus the title of Caesar, essentially an heir or subordinate, to neutralize his threat. Albinus accepts, but the truce is temporary. In 197 CE, Severus confronts Albinus decisively at the Battle of Lugdunum. The battle is brutal, reportedly one of the largest civil conflicts of the Roman Empire, with massive casualties on both sides. Severus emerges victorious, consolidating power fully and eliminating the last major rival from the year of the five emperors. By the end of 197 CE, Septimius Severus is uncontested emperor. He rules through military power, not Senate approval or virtue. His approach is pragmatic. Soldiers are rewarded generously, loyal generals are promoted, and opponents are eliminated swiftly.
The empire is stabilized, but the balance of power shifts permanently toward the army. Senators become increasingly marginalized, understanding that influence depends on proximity to legions rather than the chambered halls of Rome. Severus's personal style of governance is authoritarian but effective. He expands the Praetorian Guard, personally controls appointments, and enforces loyalty through a mix of rewards and fear. Provincial governors are monitored carefully, and corruption is punished, but often ruthlessly. Severus's reforms are aimed at consolidating imperial authority, ensuring that no rival can easily emerge, and creating a dynasty that survives beyond his lifetime. Severus also strengthens the empire's military frontiers. He campaigns in Parthia, reorganizes the legions, and fortifies the Danube and eastern borders. Unlike emperors who rely on spectacle or terror alone, Severus combines strategic planning, disciplined logistics, and personal oversight. Soldiers are trained, supplied, and often marched personally under his command. He understands that the empire's survival depends on the army's effectiveness, loyalty, and morale. On the personal front, Severus is ambitious for his family. He elevates his sons, Caracalla and Geta, as co-emperors, establishing the Severan dynasty. His marriage to Julia Domna, a politically astute and culturally influential woman from Syria, further strengthens his legitimacy. Julia Domna becomes an essential advisor, particularly in administrative, diplomatic, and cultural matters, demonstrating that family politics are as crucial as military control. Severus's reign is also marked by a combination of brutality and pragmatism. He executes potential rivals ruthlessly, sometimes including senators, consuls, and provincial governors. He is paranoid about plots, and his court becomes a dangerous place for anyone without his favor. Yet his ruthlessness is strategic, not chaotic. It ensures that no internal challenge can destabilize the empire, as it did during the year of the 5 emperors. Economically, Severus spends heavily on the army, infrastructure, and public works. While this strengthens loyalty and consolidates power, it also strains the treasury. Taxes rise, and provincial populations occasionally rebel under fiscal pressure. Severus balances this with administrative efficiency, ensuring that the empire remains functional despite the financial burden of his military policies. Severus's campaigns in the east, particularly against Parthia, are notable. He captures key cities, secures borders, and reorganizes territories to prevent future uprisings. He demonstrates strategic patience, understanding that long-term stability requires careful planning, not temporary glory. Soldiers, provinces, and allies are all integrated into a system designed for endurance, not temporary glory. Severus dies in 211 CE in Eboracum, modern York, Britain, while on campaign, leaving the empire to his sons, Caracalla and Geta. His death marks the full establishment of the Severan dynasty, but also the beginning of internal tension as his sons' differing temperaments threaten stability. Nonetheless, Severus's legacy is clear. He redefines imperial authority, prioritizes military loyalty, consolidates power ruthlessly, and demonstrates that survival in post-Commodus Rome depends on decisive strategic leadership. Severus's reign illustrates a crucial evolution. The emperor is now inseparable from the army. Political legitimacy comes second to military competence and personal loyalty of legions. Senators, citizens, and provinces must adapt to a system where power flows from the sword and the whip as much as from law, virtue, or tradition. The empire survives, grows, and stabilizes under this new model, but the human cost and moral compromises are undeniable. Next, we'll explore Caracalla, Severus's ambitious and violent son, whose reign pushes the empire into extravagance, paranoia, and sheer brutality. He is ambitious, impulsive, and obsessed with both glory and money, an emperor whose reign is remembered as much for bloodshed as for monumental decisions that shape the empire for centuries. Caracalla is born Lucius Septimius Bassianus in 188 CE in Lugdunum, modern Lyon, France.
He is the elder son of Septimius Severus and Julia Domna, a Syrian intellectual and political strategist. From an early age, Caracalla is exposed to imperial politics, military command, and cultural sophistication. Yet, unlike his father, he lacks temperance and philosophical grounding. Where Marcus Aurelius reflected, Caracalla reacts. Where Severus calculated, Caracalla indulges.
He adopts the nickname Caracalla after a Gallic-style cloak he favors, which, let's be honest, already gives him a touch of theatrical vanity. This nickname becomes so associated with him that history largely forgets his birth name, as if the man himself is inseparable from the persona he projects. And projecting is exactly what Caracalla does best. Caracalla becomes co-emperor with his father in 198 CE, ruling alongside his younger brother, Geta. Their relationship is complicated from the start. Caracalla is ambitious, ruthless, and impatient, while Geta is cautious, politically intelligent, and more diplomatic. Their joint rule is marked by tension, jealousy, and rivalry, a domestic precursor to disaster. When Septimius Severus dies in 211 CE, the stage is set for tragedy. Caracalla and Geta are technically co-emperors, but Caracalla refuses to share power. Publicly, they appear cooperative, but privately, tension escalates into plotting, intimidation, and eventually murder. Within months, Caracalla orchestrates the assassination of Geta in their mother's palace. Contemporary accounts describe soldiers and officials complicit in luring Geta into a trap where he is killed, a grim reminder that in Rome, familial bonds are often subordinate to ambition. Caracalla's rise to sole power is marked by both terror and spectacle. He purges officials who supported Geta, punishes perceived rivals, and solidifies loyalty through military rewards. Fear becomes a primary tool, much like in Commodus's reign, but amplified with calculated brutality. Caracalla understands that in a post-Severus empire, the emperor's authority depends not on legitimacy, law, or virtue, but on the immediate loyalty of the army and elimination of threats. One of the most enduring actions of Caracalla's reign is the Constitutio Antoninana, issued in 212 CE. This decree grants Roman citizenship to nearly all free inhabitants of the empire, a radical move with wide-reaching implications. On one hand, it creates a sense of unity, expanding legal rights and integrating provincial elites more directly into the imperial system. On the other hand, it is also a fiscal strategy. More citizens mean more taxable individuals, increasing imperial revenue to fund his lavish military and personal projects. Caracalla is practical, even if his motivations are mixed. Despite this administrative achievement, Caracalla's reign is dominated by violence and paranoia. He executes senators, governors, and officials who he suspects of disloyalty, often on flimsy grounds. Public spectacles, games, and military parades serve to intimidate and impress, projecting an image of invincibility while reinforcing personal authority. He combines brutality with charisma, ensuring that fear is accompanied by awe. Caracalla is obsessed with the military. He tours the frontiers constantly, participates in campaigns, and ensures that soldiers are lavishly rewarded. He even personally joins troops in battle, presenting himself as both commander and comrade. This cultivates loyalty, but also reinforces the precedent that emperors must maintain power through the army, not through law, civic respect, or public service. His reign exemplifies the shift toward military-dominated succession and authority that Severus established. One of Caracalla's most infamous episodes is his campaign against Parthia. While initially successful, it is costly and does little to stabilize the eastern provinces long term. His military adventures are as much about personal glory and spectacle as strategic necessity. Caracalla is concerned about how history will remember him as a warrior, a builder, and a dominant force, even if the empire pays the price. Caracalla's personal life mirrors his political style, indulgent, impulsive, and often cruel. Contemporary sources describe him as a man prone to fits of rage, sexual excess, and extravagant displays. He surrounds himself with favorites, soldiers, freedmen, and courtiers, whose influence is based solely on proximity and flattery. He trusts few, fears many, and rules through intimidation rather than cooperation. The financial burden of Caracalla's ambitions is enormous. Lavish games, military campaigns, and public works strain the treasury. Provinces face increased taxation and requisitioning, fueling resentment among local populations. Unlike Hadrian or Antoninus Pius, Caracalla prioritizes immediate displays of wealth, power, and loyalty over sustainable administration. His reign, while impressive in spectacle, destabilizes long-term economic equilibrium. By 217 CE, Caracalla's paranoia catches up with him. On a campaign near Carrhae in modern Turkey, he is assassinated by a soldier in a plot likely orchestrated by palace insiders and dissatisfied officers. His death, violent and abrupt, underscores the precariousness of rule in this era. Power comes with visibility, but also with mortal risk. Even a soldier emperor cannot escape the consequences of brutality, indulgence, and unchecked ambition. Caracalla's legacy is complicated. He's remembered for expanding citizenship, his obsession with military loyalty, and for the sheer audacity of his rule. Yet he also represents the dangers of inherited power, unrestrained ambition, and the cult of personal glory over stable governance. His reign accelerates the militarization of the imperial office, reinforces the precedent of violence and paranoia, and sets the stage for further instability in the decades to come.
Next, we'll examine the period following Caracalla, including Macrinus and Elagabalus, two emperors whose reigns epitomize the extremes of incompetence, spectacle, and chaos, showing that the Severan dynasty, despite its military foundation, is far from secure. After Caracalla's assassination in 217 CE, the empire faces an unusual mix of political experimentation, incompetence, and sheer indulgence. This is the era of Macrinus and Elagabalus, two emperors whose reigns illustrate just how fragile power can be when combined with ambition, religious eccentricity, and questionable judgment. Let's start with Macrinus. Born Marcus Opellius Macrinus in 165 CE in Mauritania, modern-day Algeria, he is a provincial, not of senatorial origin. In fact, he's the first emperor who is neither a senator nor of the traditional aristocracy, an outsider elevated entirely through administrative and military competence. He rose through the ranks as a capable official, particularly in the Praetorian Guard, and is known for his bureaucratic efficiency. Macrinus's rise is accidental, almost ironic. He orchestrates or is at least complicit in the assassination of Caracalla. The plot is designed to remove a tyrant, but it also positions Macrinus as the next emperor. He is immediately thrust into a position he never anticipated: absolute power over one of the largest empires in history. Unlike Caracalla, Macrinus is cautious, measured, and administratively minded. But his caution is also his weakness. Macrinus faces immediate challenges. The Severan dynasty is still respected by many, particularly Julia Domna and her family, and the army is loyal to Caracalla's memory. Provincial governors are wary, the Senate is skeptical, and the Praetorian Guard is uneasy. After all, they had just executed one emperor and installed another. Macrinus's legitimacy is constantly questioned, despite his official position. He tries to rule through rational administration. Taxes are assessed fairly, military pay is regulated, and provincial governance is strengthened. Macrinus understands that Rome cannot survive on spectacle, paranoia, or brute force alone. Yet his approach is almost too restrained. Soldiers, accustomed to Caracalla's generosity and indulgence, grumble at reduced donatives. The Praetorian Guard, which had facilitated his rise, begins to lose enthusiasm for his cautious leadership. Macrinus also confronts military challenges. The Parthian frontier, previously managed under Caracalla's campaigns, erupts into conflict.
Macrinus lacks the charisma and battlefield presence that his predecessor commanded, and he's forced to negotiate with enemy generals while managing internal discontent. His military strategy is competent but unremarkable, relying more on diplomacy than decisive action. By 218 CE, the situation becomes untenable. Julia Massa, Caracalla's aunt and a cunning political operator, hatches a plan to restore the Severid dynasty. She promotes her grandson, Elagabalus, as a legitimate heir, claiming divine support and imperial bloodline. Legions in Syria rally behind Elagabalus, and Macrinus faces rebellion on multiple fronts. Outnumbered and politically isolated, he attempts to negotiate, but the army is already swayed. Macrinus flees and is eventually captured and executed. His reign, brief and largely administrative, serves as a reminder that in Rome, competence without charisma or military loyalty is rarely enough to survive. And now we meet Elagabalus, arguably one of the most notorious and bizarre emperors in Roman history. Born Varius Avitus Bassianus around 203 CE in Emesa, Syria, he is a teenager when proclaimed emperor. Elagabalus's rule is defined less by strategy and governance than religious obsession, indulgence, and shocking personal behavior. He is a sun priest before claiming the throne, devoted to the deity Elagab, and seeks to impose this cult on Rome, a bold and audacious move. Elagabalus's ascension is orchestrated by Julia Massa, who manipulates army loyalty and presents her grandson as divinely sanctioned. The young emperor is charismatic but inexperienced, ruling through advisors, family influence, and spectacle. His fascination with ritual, processions, and religious integration dominates early policy, often at the expense of traditional Roman customs. Once in power, Elagabalus indulges in extravagance on a level that makes even Caracalla look restrained. He hosts lavish banquets, constructs elaborate temples, and participates in public ceremonies that blur the lines between religion, personal performance, and political power. Senators are bewildered, soldiers are distracted, and the Roman populace oscillates between awe and horror. Elagabalus also challenges social norms aggressively. Contemporary sources report a disregard for traditional gender roles, multiple marriages, and behavior that scandalizes Roman elites. He elevates favorites, often of obscure origin, to positions of power, undermining the Senate and traditional hierarchies. His reign becomes a theater of indulgence, alienation, and eccentricity, destabilizing the city and institutions even as the army maintains loyalty. Political instability is compounded by his youth. Advisors, particularly his grandmother Julia Massa, wield enormous influence, sometimes restraining Elagabalus's worst impulses. Yet as he grows bolder, these constraints weaken. He manipulates religion, culture, and spectacle to assert authority, often in ways that alienate traditional Roman society. Provinces, particularly those far from Syria, view his policies with suspicion, and unrest begins to simmer.
Elagabalus's obsession with the sun god Elagab leads him to attempt unprecedented religious reforms, promoting his deity above Jupiter and other traditional Roman gods. He orders ceremonies, constructs a massive temple on the Palatine Hill, and requires the Senate and populace to participate. Resistance is met with ridicule or punishment. The young emperor conflates personal devotion with imperial policy, demonstrating the dangers of unchecked religious and personal obsession in governance. Financial pressures grow as well. Lavish spending on religious cults, banquets, and public entertainment drains the treasury. Provinces are taxed heavily to fund extravagance. Soldiers remain loyal due to incentives, but the underlying economic strain threatens long-term stability. Unlike Severus or Caracalla, who at least combined personal indulgence with military pragmatism, Elagabalus prioritizes spectacle, ritual, and personal pleasure over strategic governance. By 222 CE, discontent reaches a tipping point. Julia Mamaea and the Praetorian Guard, once loyal, orchestrate a plot to remove Elagabalus in favor of his cousin Alexander Severus, a more temperate and manageable alternative. The plot succeeds.
Elagabalus is assassinated, and Rome once again demonstrates that excessive indulgence, eccentricity, and alienation of elites are fatal in the precarious world of imperial power. The reigns of Macrinus and Elagabalus illustrate the fragility of the Severan dynasty's post-Caracalla period. Military loyalty, while crucial, cannot fully compensate for poor judgment, excessive spectacle, or alienation of traditional power structures. Competence without charisma, Macrinus, and charisma without prudence, Elagabalus, both fail spectacularly, reminding Rome that emperors must balance power, legitimacy, and governance. Next, we'll explore Alexander Severus, the emperor who inherits a fractured empire and attempts to restore stability, balance, and competent administration, but faces mounting pressure from generals, soldiers, and an increasingly restless populace. After the chaotic, indulgent, and often bizarre reigns of Elagabalus and the brief cautious rule of Macrinus, Rome is exhausted. The empire has survived intrigue, assassinations, religious eccentricity, and civil strife, but the need for competent, stabilizing leadership is more urgent than ever. Enter Alexander Severus, the last notable emperor of the Severan dynasty, whose reign embodies the struggle between ambition, principle, and the brutal realities of empire. Born Marcus Aurelius Severus Alexander in 208 CE in Arca Caesarea, modern Lebanon, Alexander is the maternal cousin of Elagabalus. He is thrust into power at the tender age of 13 following the assassination of his cousin. Imagine being a teenager suddenly responsible for an empire spanning 3 continents, with treacherous generals, impatient soldiers, and wary citizens expecting either miracles or catastrophe. The weight is immense. Alexander is fortunate to have Julia Mamaea, his mother, as a guiding force. She is politically shrewd, highly intelligent, and determined to protect her son while ensuring competent governance. Julia essentially becomes co-ruler, advising on administration, policy, and military matters. Her influence is crucial, but it also complicates Alexander's reign. He is perceived as a puppet by some, undermining authority even as he tries to assert control. Unlike Elagabalus, Alexander is conscientious, disciplined, and philosophically inclined. He values justice, administrative competence, and moral propriety. From the start, he attempts to restore order and credibility to the Severan dynasty. He restructures the bureaucracy, regulates taxation, and enforces fair treatment in provincial governance. Unlike his flamboyant predecessor, Alexander rules through restraint and methodical administration, trying to rebuild trust among senators, soldiers, and citizens alike. Yet the empire is under enormous pressure. Economically, the Severan extravagance of the previous decades has strained resources. Soldiers are accustomed to high pay and donatives, and provincial populations are burdened by taxes imposed to fund military campaigns. Militarily, threats loom on multiple fronts: the Germanic tribes along the Rhine and Danube, the Sasanian Persians in the east, and lingering unrest in Africa. Alexander must govern as both diplomat and general, despite his youth and limited personal experience. One of Alexander's notable approaches is legal and administrative reform. He is keen to establish fairness and integrity in governance. He limits excessive taxation, curbs corruption, and enforces fair treatment in provincial governance. Unlike earlier emperors who rely primarily on spectacle or brute force, Alexander attempts to build authority through justice, competence, and consistency. These efforts earn him admiration from scholars and citizens, though they do little to quell unrest among soldiers who expect generous rewards rather than restraint. Alexander also confronts external threats with a blend of pragmatism and strategy. He campaigns against Germanic tribes along the northern frontiers, not for conquest, but to stabilize borders and prevent incursions. His approach is cautious. He avoids unnecessary bloodshed and seeks negotiated settlements where possible. Similarly, in the east, he manages conflicts with the Sasanian Persians through a combination of fortification, diplomacy, and careful deployment of legions. Alexander's style contrasts sharply with Caracalla's aggressive campaigns or Elagabalus's religious-infused military displays.
However, Alexander's greatest weakness lies in the army. Soldiers who fought under Caracalla, Macrinus, and Elagabalus are restless, accustomed to lavish pay, direct action, and charismatic leadership. Alexander, a teenager with a philosophic-driven approach, is viewed as weak or overly cautious. While his policies are designed for long-term stability, soldiers desire immediate gratification, bonuses, plunder, and glory. His inability to balance moral governance with martial expectations creates tension that will ultimately prove fatal.
Internal politics also challenge Alexander. Senators, grateful for the end of Elagabalus's excesses, cautiously support his reforms. Yet Julia the Maya's influence sparks resentment. Some senators and courtiers view her guidance as overreach, undermining Alexander's authority. He must navigate palace intrigue, familial power dynamics, and the lingering influence of Elagabalus's supporters, all while maintaining a coherent imperial agenda. Alexander's personal virtues are remarkable in historical terms. He is educated, reflective, and committed to justice. He emphasizes religious tolerance, allowing traditional Roman and provincial practices to coexist. He supports public works, maintains infrastructure, and seeks to stabilize the empire financially. Yet these virtues, admirable to historians, do not translate into survival in a world dominated by the army's whims and court intrigue. Despite these efforts, Alexander's reign is punctuated by continuous military campaigns. The northern frontiers demand attention. Tribes such as the Alemanni and Franks raid provinces, requiring rapid response. Alexander personally oversees fortifications, troop movements, and supply lines, demonstrating diligence, but also exposing his youth and inexperience in the eyes of seasoned generals. Each campaign is a delicate balancing act. Too cautious, and he appears weak. Too aggressive, and he risks unsustainable losses. In 222 CE, Alexander faces a crisis in the northern provinces. Troops stationed along the Rhine, dissatisfied with pay and leadership, rebel. The rebellion is amplified by internal conspiracies within the court and the lingering influence of Severan-era loyalists who question Alexander's competence. These combined pressures create an environment ripe for assassination and political upheaval. Tragically, Alexander's death comes not from a foreign enemy, but from within his own ranks. Discontented soldiers murder him, along with his mother Julia Mamaia, during a campaign. Contemporary accounts describe the assassination as brutal yet swift, a reminder that in the Roman world, youth, virtue, and administrative competence provide no shield against the raw force of army-driven politics. Alexander's legacy is a study in contrasts. He is an intelligent, disciplined, and morally inclined ruler attempting to restore order to a fractured empire. His policies emphasize justice, administration, and stability, qualities that historically prolong empires. Yet his reign also demonstrates the limits of virtue in a militarized, restless, and politically ruthless Rome. Soldiers demand spectacle and reward. Courts demand charisma or ruthlessness. Alexander's balance of morality and prudence, while historically commendable, is insufficient to survive the era's brutal dynamics. Ultimately, Alexander Severus represents the last meaningful attempt of the Severan dynasty to restore stable governance. His assassination marks the beginning of the crisis of the 3rd century, a period of rapid imperial turnover, military anarchy, economic turmoil, and external threats. The empire enters a phase where competent administration, philosophical reflection, or moral virtue can no longer survive. Next, we'll explore the crisis of the 3rd century, examining the rapid succession of emperors, military coups, invasions, plagues, and internal breakdown of Roman institutions, a period that tests the empire's resilience like never before. This crisis begins around 335 CE with the assassination of Alexander Severus. With him dies the last attempt at moral and competent governance from the Severan dynasty. Suddenly, the empire lacks a stabilizing force. Soldiers proclaim their generals as emperors, governors exploit power vacuums, barbarian tribes invade weak borders, and plagues and economic instability compound the chaos. Rome is no longer the center of orderly administration, it's a battlefield, both figuratively and literally. The first to step into this new age of turbulence is Maximinus Thrax, a towering Thracian soldier with legendary physical strength, reportedly over 8 feet tall in some accounts, though historians suspect exaggeration. Maximinus is an outsider, with no senatorial pedigree, rising purely through military prowess. He becomes emperor through the army's support, immediately demonstrating the shift. Rome is now ruled by soldiers, for soldiers, and often against civilians. Maximinus is brutal but effective. He campaigns against Germanic tribes along the Rhine and Danube, expands fortifications, and punishes disloyalty ruthlessly. Yet his focus on the military alienates the Senate and urban elites. By the end of his reign, he is overthrown by his own soldiers, proving the precariousness of power when legitimacy relies solely on force. Following Maximinus, the empire enters a whirlwind of emperors, often called the barracks emperors. In the next 50 years, Rome sees over 20 emperors, most of whom are assassinated or deposed within months. Each rises through military support, survives through violence, and often dies violently. Civil war becomes constant. Borders are contested not just by barbarians, but by Roman generals fighting each other. Stability is fleeting, and trust in institutions evaporates. Economic collapse intensifies the crisis. Soldiers demand increased pay, provinces are taxed heavily, and currency is devalued. Inflation skyrockets as emperors mint coins to fund armies. Trade routes are disrupted by invasions and internal strife. Cities suffer famine, plagues sweep across the empire, and the social fabric begins to fray. Rome's traditional mechanisms of governance, Senate authority, provincial administration, law enforcement, cannot withstand the pressures.
One of the more fascinating aspects of this period is the role of usurpation and civil war. Generals are constantly proclaimed emperor by legions, forcing the empire into near-perpetual military conflict. Regions like Gaul, Spain, and the East sometimes break away, creating short-lived breakaway states like the Gallic Empire or the Palmyrian Empire. While temporary, these secessions illustrate the fragility of central authority and the growing autonomy of provinces. During this era, emperors are often more performers than rulers. Their survival depends on charisma, military strategy, and ruthlessness. Administrative competence is secondary. An emperor may spend days touring camps, bribing soldiers, or executing rivals just to maintain control. Spectacle, fear, and personal loyalty replace institutions and law as the glue of empire. It's chaos personified, yet Rome endures. External pressures intensify the internal crisis. The Sassanid Empire rises in Persia, launching repeated invasions into Mesopotamia. Germanic tribes along the Rhine and Danube exploit weak defenses, raiding and sometimes settling in Roman territory. The empire is stretched thin, forced to defend a vast territory while managing internal fragmentation. Emperors juggle multiple fronts, rarely finding stability long enough to consolidate power. Amid the chaos, some emperors attempt reforms. Aurelian, for instance, restores borders, defeats breakaway states, and strengthens fortifications. He is one of the few who combines military prowess with administrative skill. Yet even his successes are temporary solutions. The systemic instability of the empire requires long-term structural reform, which is difficult under constant threat and turnover. The social consequences of the crisis are profound. Urban populations shrink due to plagues and famine, rural areas face taxation and conscription pressures, and the elite class loses influence to militarized power. Roman society becomes increasingly militarized, with survival depending on allegiance to local commanders or the emperor rather than civic institutions. Culture, philosophy, and public life adapt to this instability, emphasizing loyalty, discipline, and sometimes fatalistic obedience. Religious and cultural shifts also accelerate. During this period, new religious movements gain traction, including mystery cults and the early spread of Christianity. People seek solace and stability in spiritual practices as the secular world collapses into chaos. Religion increasingly becomes a personal anchor rather than a tool of imperial propaganda, though emperors often manipulate it for legitimacy. By the end of the 3rd century, the empire has endured half a century of unprecedented instability. Emperors rise and fall violently, borders are constantly contested, and economic and social structures are strained to the breaking point. Yet remarkably, Rome survives, demonstrating resilience, adaptability, and the capacity of a vast empire to absorb shocks even when leadership is incompetent or cruel. The crisis of the 3rd century highlights several key truths. Military power dominates political authority. Institutional stability is fragile under constant pressure, and the survival of an empire is not guaranteed by virtue or competence alone. Rome's endurance is as much a story of luck, geography, and inertia as it is of leadership. Next, we'll examine the reforms of Diocletian, the man who emerges from this chaos to reorganize, stabilize, and attempt to save the empire from collapse, introducing new political structures, economic policies, and administrative divisions that redefine Rome for centuries. After decades of civil war, usurpation, economic turmoil, and external invasions, Rome is in desperate need of structure, stability, and, let's be honest, a ruler who actually knows what he's doing. Enter Diocletian, a man who rises from humble provincial origins to reshape the empire in ways that will last for centuries. He's the ultimate problem solver, the emperor who says, if Rome is going to survive, I need to break it into manageable pieces, literally. Diocletian is born Diocles around 244 CE in Dalmatia, modern-day Croatia, in a modest family. Unlike the Severan emperors or Caracalla, he is not part of the traditional elite. His rise is entirely based on merit, military talent, and political acumen. By the time he is proclaimed emperor in 284 CE, Rome has endured half a century of chaos, and the army and senate are desperate for someone who can impose order. Diocletian's first challenge is obvious. He must stabilize the empire while convincing generals, soldiers, and provincial governors that he is the one capable of survival. Diocletian's signature move is the creation of the Tetrarchy, or Rule of Four. Recognizing that the empire is too vast for one man to govern effectively, he divides authority between 2 senior emperors, or Augusti, and 2 junior emperors, or Caesars, each responsible for a geographic quadrant. It's clever, strategic, and, let's be honest, a little paranoid. Rome may be the eternal city, but Diocletian knows it cannot survive central control from a single office anymore. By decentralizing authority, he simultaneously increases efficiency and ensures that military loyalty is regionally organized. Diocletian also reorganizes the administrative system. Provinces are subdivided, governors are supervised more closely, and bureaucratic layers expand to improve accountability. Taxes are standardized, and attempts are made to control rampant inflation. He even introduces price edicts to curb the chaos of a devalued currency. Some measures are heavy-handed, like the Edict on Maximum Prices, which attempts to fix wages and prices across the empire, but in a world that has suffered decades of instability, desperate measures are necessary.
On the military front, Diocletian is proactive. He fortifies borders, reorganizes legions, and personally supervises campaigns against Germanic tribes, Sassanid Persia, and internal rebellions. Unlike many of his predecessors, he understands that political stability cannot exist without military security. Soldiers are disciplined, well-supplied, and incentivized, but the emperor ensures they remain subordinate to the administrative hierarchy. Loyalty is rewarded, but excesses are controlled. One of the most fascinating aspects of Diocletian's reign is his approach to imperial authority and ritual. He understands that perception is power. He cultivates an aura of divine majesty, requiring elaborate ceremonies, titles, and regalia. He transforms the emperor from a public servant into a quasi-divine figure whose authority is unquestionable. This is a smart political move. After decades of rapid assassinations, usurpations, and rebellion, projecting invincibility is as necessary as military strategy. Economically, Diocletian addresses decades of decline. He reforms taxation systems, standardizes coinage, and attempts to stabilize markets. While his price edicts largely fail in practice, they demonstrate his awareness of the need for centralized economic control. The bureaucracy expands, and provincial governors are closely monitored to ensure compliance. Diocletian is not a populist, he is a systems thinker, focused on structure, enforcement, and sustainability. Diocletian also moves the administrative center of the empire. While Rome remains symbolic, the practical seat of imperial authority shifts east to Nicomedia and later Nicomedes, reflecting a strategic understanding that the empire's resources, military, and threats are increasingly located in the eastern provinces. The western provinces remain critical, but Rome's centrality is more ceremonial than functional under Diocletian. On the religious front, Diocletian is cautious but politically shrewd. While he emphasizes traditional Roman cults and imperial rituals to legitimize authority, he also faces the growing challenge of Christianity. Famously, he initiates one of the empire's most severe persecutions of Christians, not out of theological zeal alone, but as a tool to consolidate authority and suppress groups that might undermine state unity. His approach is strategic, brutal, and deeply pragmatic, if politically dangerous in hindsight. Diocletian also plans for succession carefully, learning from the mistakes of Severus, Caracalla, and Alexander. The tetrarchy is designed to ensure orderly transfer of power, with junior emperors succeeding senior emperors in a controlled manner. While in practice the system eventually collapses due to human ambition and competing generals, for a time it brings unprecedented stability after decades of chaos. By the end of his reign in 305 CE, Diocletian has fundamentally transformed the Roman Empire. Borders are fortified, administration is rationalized, taxation is standardized, and the emperor's office is redefined as a quasi-divine, almost unassailable institution. He voluntarily abdicates, retiring to his palace in Split, Dalmatia, an almost unheard-of act for a Roman emperor, demonstrating personal discipline and strategic planning. Diocletian's legacy is profound. He does not restore Rome to the glory of Augustus or Trajan, but he saves it from disintegration after a half-century of turmoil. He demonstrates that military power, bureaucratic efficiency, strategic delegation, and personal authority can combine to stabilize an empire on the brink of collapse. His reign is a turning point. Rome survives internal collapse and external threats not through luck alone, but through systematic reform, organization, and disciplined leadership. Next, we'll explore Constantine the Great, the emperor who inherits Diocletian's reorganized empire, transforms religion, and lays the foundation for the Byzantine world, showing how the Roman Empire adapts, evolves, and survives centuries of crisis through innovation, ambition, and sometimes sheer ruthlessness. Constantine is born around 272 CE in Naissus, modern-day Serbia, to Constantius Chlorus, a senior military officer, and Helena, who will later become Saint Helena. From the start, he's a product of the Severan and Tetrarchic eras, trained in military discipline, exposed to political maneuvering, and aware of the fragility of power. Unlike previous emperors who inherited the throne, Constantine must navigate the treacherous politics of succession, civil war, and the remnants of Diocletian's divided empire. After his father dies in 306 CE while campaigning in Britain, Constantine is proclaimed emperor by his troops, but he is not yet universally recognized. Rival claimants, including Maxentius in Rome and Licinius in the East, contest his authority. For years, Constantine must fight not only external enemies but internal rivals, proving his legitimacy through military success, political cunning, and alliances. It's a world where an emperor is nothing without the army's backing, and Constantine understands this instinctively. One of the defining moments of Constantine's early career is the Battle of the Milvian Bridge in 312 CE. According to tradition, Constantine experiences a vision, crosses the battlefield with a Christian symbol, and subsequently converts to Christianity. Whether literal or symbolic, this moment is a turning point. Constantine begins to leverage religion as a tool of authority, while personally committing to a faith that will reshape the empire. It's political genius wrapped in a spiritual narrative. Constantine consolidates power systematically. He defeats Maxentius, Licinius, and other rivals, gradually uniting the empire under his sole control. He demonstrates both military skill and strategic patience, ensuring that loyalty is rewarded but disloyalty is punished. Soldiers, bureaucrats, and provincial governors learn that Constantine is decisive, shrewd, and often ruthless. The message is clear: survival and success depend on alignment with his authority. In 324 CE, Constantine moves the imperial capital from Rome to Byzantium, later renamed Constantinople. This is not just a political maneuver, but a strategic masterstroke. The new capital is better positioned to control the eastern provinces, trade routes, and military fronts. It symbolizes a shift. The empire is no longer Rome-centric, and power is increasingly defined by geography, military presence, and administrative efficiency. One of Constantine's most enduring legacies is the legal recognition of Christianity. Through the Edict of Milan in 313 CE, he grants freedom of worship to Christians, ending decades of intermittent persecution. This move is pragmatic, consolidating support among a growing religious group while simultaneously redefining the ideological foundation of the empire. Constantine uses religion as a unifying force, intertwining spiritual authority with imperial legitimacy. Constantine also reforms the empire's administration and military. He strengthens provincial governance, reorganizes the army into mobile and frontier units, and continues Diocletian's model of shared imperial authority, though he consolidates power in his person rather than relying on a tetrarchy. Taxes are regulated, infrastructure is expanded, and law codes are standardized, efforts that stabilize an empire previously racked by internal conflict. Yet Constantine's reign is not free from brutality or intrigue. Rival claimants, including family members, are eliminated, sometimes violently. Sons and relatives are imprisoned, executed, or sidelined to secure succession. Constantine's consolidation of power is absolute, reflecting a pattern we've seen before. The survival and stability of Rome often come at immense human cost. Economically, Constantine encourages urban growth, infrastructure projects, and coinage reform. The empire becomes more monetized, trade networks expand, and military expenditure is carefully managed to prevent the financial collapse that plagued previous emperors. He also commissions monumental architecture, including churches and public buildings, projecting power, legitimacy, and divine favor. Culturally, Constantine reshapes Rome's identity. By integrating Christianity into imperial ideology, he transforms religious life, legal systems, and even art. Public ceremonies and political rituals increasingly reflect a fusion of traditional Roman authority and Christian symbolism. Constantine's reign is a bridge between the pagan, militarized Rome of the 3rd century and the Christianized Byzantine world that will follow. By the time of his death in 337 CE, Constantine has secured the empire, redefined religious authority, and established a capital that will endure for over 1,000 years. His legacy is complex, a combination of military genius, political strategy, religious innovation, and ruthless consolidation. He embodies the transformation of Rome from a traditional imperial state into a Christian, administratively sophisticated, militarized empire, poised for survival despite centuries of previous instability. Next, we'll explore the later 4th century emperors, examining how Constantine's reforms, the Christianization of the empire, and ongoing military and administrative challenges shape the trajectory of Rome as it transitions toward the Byzantine era, highlighting both continuity and emerging fractures.
After Constantine's death in 337 CE, the empire is divided among his sons, a practice he reluctantly accepts, but which inevitably sparks conflict. The tetrarchic principles from Diocletian resurface in modified form, multiple rulers controlling different regions, coordinating military defense and managing civil administration. Yet, unlike Diocletian's careful planning, Constantine's heirs are less competent, more ambitious, and frequently at odds. Civil wars, assassinations, and political intrigue continue, though the underlying administrative structures of the empire survive. One of the key figures in this period is Constantius II, Constantine's second son. He inherits the eastern provinces and spends much of his reign consolidating authority, managing external threats from the Sassanid Empire, and suppressing internal dissent. His rule demonstrates that even with strong administrative reforms in place, personal skill, military leadership, and the loyalty of troops are critical for stability. Constantius II is competent but cautious, often resorting to diplomacy and coercion rather than spectacle or innovation. Meanwhile, the Western Empire faces a series of challenges from Germanic tribes along the Rhine and Danube. Gothic migrations, Saxon raids, and other pressures strain border defenses. Local commanders, sometimes more loyal to their legions than to the emperor, become powerful political actors. Civil and external pressures overlap, creating a complex web of military and administrative challenges. In some ways, the empire has learned from the crises of the 3rd century. Fortifications are stronger, bureaucracy is more organized, and succession mechanisms exist. But the human factor, ambition, greed, and disloyalty remains unpredictable. Religiously, this period cements the transformation that began under Constantine. Christianity increasingly shapes imperial policy, law, and public life. Pagan traditions are tolerated but gradually marginalized. Emperors like Theodosius I actively legislate religious orthodoxy, making Christianity the state religion by the end of the 4th century. This has profound implications for administration, social cohesion, and cultural identity.
Economically, the empire adapts to the challenges of a divided authority and constant military pressure. Taxes continue to fund armies, fortifications, and urban centers. Coinage reform stabilizes currency to some extent, and trade routes, while threatened by invasions, remain active across the Mediterranean. Local economies are increasingly tied to imperial policy, military protection, and the church, demonstrating the interdependence of political, religious, and economic systems. The later 4th century also sees dramatic shifts in the military. Frontier troops gain increased political leverage, while mobile field armies expand to respond to internal rebellions and barbarian incursions. Emperors must constantly negotiate, bribe, or fight to maintain loyalty. This period demonstrates that Rome's survival is increasingly dependent on strategic deployment of military power, often more than administrative efficiency or economic stability. Despite all these pressures, the empire demonstrates remarkable resilience. Constantinople thrives as a political and economic center, fortifications hold, administrative structures continue functioning, and the integration of Christian ideology provides a unifying framework. This adaptability ensures the empire can survive decades of turmoil and sets the stage for the eventual Byzantine civilization. By the end of the 4th century, the empire has undergone profound transformations. Authority has shifted from Rome to regional capitals like Constantinople. Military loyalty remains the decisive factor in political survival. Christianity is now central to imperial identity and governance. Bureaucracy and administrative structures, expanded under Diocletian and refined under Constantine, provide stability despite constant threats. Yet the period also highlights persistent vulnerabilities. Internal rivalries, barbarian pressure, and economic strain remain unresolved, foreshadowing the challenges that the 5th century will bring to both the western and eastern halves of the empire. The story of Rome is one of adaptation, endurance, and transformation, but also of human ambition, violence, and the fragile balance between order and chaos. And with that, Our extended journey through Roman history, spanning emperors from Augustus to Constantine and beyond, illustrates the complex interplay of power, personality, military might, and institutional innovation. Rome survives crises, reforms itself, and continues to adapt, proving that while leaders may fall, the empire's structures and ideas endure far beyond any single lifetime.